welcome to Gamescom. We're sat over at the Crysis 3 area, and I managed to pull Mike aside, who's going to sit and chat to us for a little bit, but would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure, my name is Mike Reed. I'm a producer on Crysis 3.
Okay, so most people should be familiar with the Crysis series, but for those that aren't, do you want to give them a very quick overview?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is the third installment of Crysis. Crysis 1 released back in 2007, Crysis 2 in 2011, and following up, of course, in 2013 with Crysis 3. So at the heart of what everybody recognizes to do with Crysis is, of course, the nanosuit. Once you see the nanosuit, it's like synonymous with the series.
Oh, yes.
So it's really hard to get away from that. But so over the years and over the course of development of the first two games, I mean, we learned a lot about I learned a lot about tweaking the game and, directions we want to go and things we want to do. And we're trying to take a lot of those elements that we learned in Crysis 1 and Crysis 2 and really combine the best of those in Crysis 3.
Okay, so do you want to tell us a little bit about the story of what's going on in Crysis 3?
Sure. Without going, I mean, the story is so deep in Crysis, and we just keep going. I get a lot of questions in the media and from fans about what happened to this guy and what's going on here and what's going on there. So, in Crysis 1, you and a group of operatives, all kitted out with nanosuits, were inserted into this island,
yes,
out in the Pacific to extract some individuals. But as the story progressed, they found out there was more to it. There was an alien threat that had to do with it. In Crysis 2, the alien threat became more predominant. We moved the whole series to New York City, where New York City was under siege, and we followed an operative by the name of Alcatraz, who received the suit from Prophet, who killed himself at the beginning of Crysis 2.
Yeah.
And he progressed through the game. Everybody thought that he was somebody. Everybody thought he was Prophet in the suit. They discovered this. There was a lot of changes. People need to go and play that, by the way. And then by the end of Crysis 2, there was a question asked by somebody that said, and the answer was, "I am Prophet." And so it kind of threw people for a bit of a loop as to where the story was. And, Prophet killed himself at the beginning. And now in Crysis 3, you're coming back and yet again you're playing Prophet. So there's a lot of unanswered questions as to where did Prophet come from? He killed himself. So we're going to try to answer a lot of those in Crysis 3. So Crysis 3 kicks off 20 or more years after the events of Crysis 2, in 2047. So the Cell Corporation and Ceph, the Cell Corporation, which people may recognize from Crysis 2, has built these nanodomes over top of all the major cities worldwide. And in doing that, they've told the public that we're protecting you from the Ceph threat, we're going to eliminate them, we're going to really keep them down. But there's actually other hidden motives that are going on under these domes and outside of the domes, in that Cell has managed to take control of the world's energy resources. So you're playing, as I said before, you're playing as Prophet, and Prophet is having these very strange visions which he doesn't understand, visions of the future, visions of the end of mankind, and it really starts off where he will stop at nothing to figure all this out and get to the goal. There's going to be a large amount of character development, character interactions that we've never seen before in the Crysis series.
Okay, so you're showing off the multiplayer here at Gamescom, and just got some hands-on with it, and we're going to have some footage hopefully running over this, but you're bringing new modes to it, different changes from previous games, all kinds of really interesting stuff. Should we start with the modes?
Yeah, so the two modes we're showcasing here at Gamescom, we have Hunter and Crash Site, and we're showcasing just one map. We're going to have a total of about 12 maps, I think, in the final version, and 8 game modes total. So Hunter mode, which is the first one and the primary one that we're showcasing here, basically you start off 16 on PC, 12 on console, and 2 players start off in nanosuits, and they're the hunters. And the nanosuits have a bow, they're permanently cloaked, and it's a pretty high adrenaline rush. But then you have the troopers. Everybody else plays as the troopers, and what they need to do is survive for 2 minutes before the hunters kill them all off. And the hunters' mission is very simple. They need to stay alive, or they need to kill all of the troopers before that 2 minutes is up.
It's very fast-paced.
Yes.
It's really crazy, quick, short bursts, and that seems to keep things fresh.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it really causes people to make decisions very fast in the short amount of time that you have to do this. whether it be just fending for your life as a trooper or as the hunters and how many guys you really have to take out. It's not all about the kills, it's all about how long you stay alive, the different methods you use to take out the other teams. And what we really wanted to do was provide a high amount of tension in the gameplay itself.
I found myself, when I was actually playing as one of the cell operatives, I started off by just hiding and then looking straight down at the ground so no one could see what check my screen. But then as slowly more and more died and the numbers started rising of how many hunters there were, I found myself running instead.
Right, and that's what you end up having to do right at the end of it. It's, you end up being the last guy on the map, and it's really just trying to survive that time. And there's no way you're going to take out the other 15 guys that are coming after you. It's almost impossible. Not to mention they can see you on the mini-map as well, so they're able to track you, which makes it even more difficult. But I mean, some people say, oh, well, that sounds hugely imbalanced and that doesn't work, but we've seen a whole host of games played over the last few days in these rooms, and it's gone from one end of the spectrum to another, where either the cell guys are really doing well or the hunters are really doing well. So it's really a back and forth mode, and it kind of breaks up the monotony of some of the standard modes that are out there. I mean, it's not that we expect people to solely play that, although that would be cool, but it's just one of those other tools in the box that we have for multiplayer.
I must admit, there's no feeling like those last 10 seconds when you are the last cell alive.
Absolutely. That's really the tension we wanted to convey. And when we put together the trailer, we wanted to convey that same kind of tension in the trailer to get people to understand what the mode was about. And I think we really hit on that well. Yeah. And then, because when you stand back and you watch somebody play Hunter, it's not quite as exciting. But when you get into it and you're hearing all the sounds and you're flipping around and you're looking for what's going on, and it's like almost the whole room is quiet.
Oh, yes.
And then at the end of it, everybody's like, oh my God, that was so intense. That was so much fun.
So you've also got some older game modes in there, but with new tricks.
Yeah, so Crash Site's in there. We've really gone back and refined a lot of the gameplay and we've balanced things a lot more than before, and also made it easier for players to get into. I mean, some people would think that, okay, you've got this nanosuit, okay, you've really only got 2 extra buttons for armor and cloak. But what we found is that some people who are way ahead of the curve on that, and for new people getting into it, and that might take a little bit more time, we went back and kind of looked at that and said, okay, the sprint, we completely decoupled that from the energy now. Yeah. And as before, it was 1 energy bar for your cloak, for your armor, and for your sprint. And I mean, that's a lot to do in a multiplayer mode, never mind the single player mode. And so we've actually boiled that back to the single player as well and decoupled the sprint out of that one, or at least we're looking at it. I'm not sure if that's going to end up staying in, but I'm pretty sure. And then for the multiplayer modes, we have decoupling of the sprint. You have an independent armor bar and an independent cloak bar as well. Yeah. And then on top of that, something we've added in for new players when they're getting into game is auto armor. So when you're being shot at and you get down, it will automatically kick on the armor. But that module it's good for starters, but can be removed. Yeah. And then you can put other modules in that place later on once you get used to it. So it provides new players a little bit of an extra chance when they're starting out to learn those extra buttons.
You mentioned like taking modules out. The amount of customization you've got this time round is you're really kind of taking it up one.
Yeah, there's a large number of customizations. I don't think you guys got the chance to see like the New York feed, for instance.
We saw it briefly in the presentation.
There was a screen in there, and unfortunately we had to cut down the demo times because of the lines that were going on here. But in between matches, what'll happen is there'll be challenges that come up where you can pick from a series of these, but they're dynamically generated by the system. Yeah. And so you'll get a variety of challenges that you can pick from, but you must perform these challenges inside of a certain number of games. So like your friend goes into a game, he performs 3 stealth kills over 2 games. So that may pose a challenge to you to go, well, can you make 4 stealth kills in 3 games? And then if you beat that, you'll get an XP bonus on top of it, and that'll end up providing a new challenge. So there's 3 feeds in there. Customization on stuff too. I mean, as you progress, there's more unlocks to change the default kit. You can change it during the games, but I mean, it's not something that's probably going to be too common. It's really getting those unlocks, finding what you're comfortable with, and then sticking around with those. There'll be about 50 different levels that'll be in game as well. Yeah. And then, of course, the module system where you can plug in these different perk modules that can help you out a little bit more.
So you were mentioning that the hunter mode is 12 and 16, depending on what you're playing it on.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have been pretty awesome when it comes to the looking after the PC guys in the past. What can we kind of expect for 3?
Yeah, so that's a pretty big question. We've received a lot. So what happened, to roll back a little bit, looking at what happened during Crysis 2, we had to take the engine, we had to rip it apart, make it work on console, which provided a whole new host of technical challenges, and this was being done while the development of Crysis 2 was going on. So now we don't have that problem in Crysis 3. We know how this functions, we know how it works, we can create this game as a whole on Xbox, on PS3, and on PC, and provide those with the hardware to run it at the top end, to be able to utilize a lot of the functions that will be available at that time for DX11. That's not to say we're going to restrict people to say, oh, you need to have the best equipment and 5 video cards in your machine to run our stuff. That's really not the case. We haven't got to a point where we've determined what the minimum specs are, but between the minimum specs and the top end specs, it's
there should be a good range.
I think it will end up being a good range. We've learned a lot from that, and you'll have a lot of control over the anti-aliasing and various fog and maybe FOV. I haven't seen that in there specifically. We still have a lot to do on that end of it. But once we find that min spec level, we can start scaling and figure out where we're at from there.
Okay, so do you have a release date in mind?
Yeah, so the release is, well, not a specific date, but a specific month right now.
Roughly then?
Roughly in February of 2013, this game is going to release on Xbox, PS3, and of course PC as well.
Okay, and do you want to give them the web address where they can go and keep checking on what's going on as we get closer to that date?
There's a few different addresses, but you can go to www.crysis.com. That has the most up-to-date information. We also have our community site as well, which is www.mycrysis.com, and there's a lot of community links in there to our forums and everything that's going on. Of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter and everything else.
Do you want to give those as well?
I can't remember them off the top of my head. I think it's Facebook. There's the official Facebook one is facebook.com/Crysis, I believe. And I believe it's the same. Actually, it's the same one for Twitter. It's twitter.com/Crysis.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.